Coming up today, Korea and Japan discuss the agenda for a trilateral summit with China. But Seoul's top diplomat says Tokyo needs to resolve its wartime sex slavery if it wants to improve bilateral ties. South Korea expresses regret that North Korea has mentioned the possibility of scrapping planned reunions of war-separated families. Plus, Russia begins airstrikes against Islamic State positions in Syria. Moscow denies reports that dozens of civilians were killed. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, October 1st here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, South Korea's foreign minister has held in-depth discussions with his Japanese counterpart on ways to carry forward a possible bilateral summit between the leaders of the two countries on the sidelines of a planned three-way summit with China. After meeting with Fumio Kishida in New York on Wednesday on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Yoon Byung-se told reporters that the two discussed details surrounding the agenda for the trilateral summit that's expected to be held later this month in Seoul. Apart from preparations for the three-way summit, the diplomats said they will likely continue to hold working-level talks until the end of the year for a bilateral summit. Now, in regards to Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women, Minister Yoon said he explained the urgency of the issue and stressed that it had to be resolved in order to improve Seoul-Tokyo relations. South Korea says it regrets North Korea's threat to call off planned reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The regime was furious with the content of President Park Geun-hye's speech to the UN earlier this week. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea's Unification Ministry on Wednesday voiced regret at Pyongyang's threat to cancel the planned separated families reunion and called on the North not to back out on already agreed humanitarian issues.
The South Korean government urges the North to stop denouncing and criticising President Park's UN speech and comply with the high-level talks agreed to in August. Pyongyang should not turn away from humanitarian issues like the separated families reunion, threatening it for political and military means.
North Korea slammed President Park Geun-hye for her speech this week at the United Nations, in which she warned Pyongyang about the consequences of further provocations. North Korea's committee in charge of inter-Korean relations said President Park has spewed out thoughtless words that attack Korea's own people and set the two Koreas at odds on the global stage. The committee claimed the speech ruined North-South relations when they were just beginning to thaw. It went on to say that President Park's speech, in the name of peace, reflected her ambition to reunify the Koreas by absorbing the North into the South with the help of foreign countries. It also said the South Korean leader had jeopardized planned reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The meetings are scheduled to be held at North Korea's Mount Kungang Resort from October 20th to the 26th. Meanwhile, President Park said on Monday that Seoul would fully support North Korea in developing its economy and improving the quality of life of its people if the regime abandons its nuclear program. The two Koreas made a landmark agreement last month to hold high-level inter-Korean talks in Seoul or Pyongyang as soon as possible. But experts say this too looks murky as the atmosphere turns hostile on the peninsula. On top of North Korea's possible launch of a long-range rocket to coincide the 70th anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
North Korea's ambassador to the UK says his country is prepared to launch a nuclear strike against the United States in case a war breaks out on the Korean peninsula. During a speech in London on Wednesday, Hyun Hak-bong claimed Washington was interfering in peace efforts between South and North Korea and engaging in regular war games. The envoy warned that, should a war break out in the region, North Korea's range will not be limited to the boundaries of the Korean peninsula. He was quoted as saying that nuclear warheads with their explosive power 10 times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima will be flying across the Pacific Ocean. The diplomat stressed the North now has full capability to counter any kind of threat by the US. Turning to local politics now, and there was an unexpected agreement among rival party leaders over the Chuseok holiday, but now that the holiday is over, the friendly atmosphere seems to have evaporated. Ji Myung-gil has more.
Saenuri Party chief Kim Moo-sung said Wednesday that the ruling party will create a special consultation body to discuss adopting a new form of an open primary system.
Our party has decided to create a special body to discuss making a new variation of an open primary, and we will also discuss the public nomination system that uses secure numbers.
Kim also said the presidential house of Cheongwade should not insult a party's leader and told lawmakers who are loyal to President Park Geun-hye to refrain from offensive remarks. Earlier on the day, the presidential office criticized the adoption of the nomination system using secured numbers, as it could distort public opinion and work in favor of heavyweight candidates. Meanwhile, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy called for the ruling party's support of the bipartisan agreement.
I cannot understand why some ruling party lawmakers are making irrelevant remarks. I hope the National Assembly's Special Committee on Political Reform will start drawing up bills to implement the system.
Moon urged the ruling party to continue discussions regarding the introduction of a new proportional representation system and the creation of guidelines for rezoning constituencies. However, the MPAD's minority faction lawmakers also opposed the agreement, saying it fails to clarify what an open primary based on a secured number is. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
And now to more about a system to nominate political candidates based on so-called secured numbers. Our Park Ji-won tells us how it works and why some think it's a bad idea.
The leaders of Korea's main rebel parties agreed during the Chuseok holiday that the two parties will adopt a candidate nomination system for next year's general elections that's similar to a U.S. open primary system, but which has also supplemented the weakness of the system. A so-called secure number open primary means participants, both party members and non-party members, can vote for a candidate of their own choice through mobile phone polling, the number of which is concealed during the voting process. For the candidate selection system to work, Korea's mobile service carriers like SKT and KT need to cooperate with the parties to conceal a voter's phone number. The system is known to be free from any manipulation as the number samples are randomly chosen, free from any privacy concerns of participants, and also reduce costs for the nomination process compared to polling at actual polling stations. However, controversy remains over whether the system is safe from all possible problems. The presidential office expressed concerns the system could distort the public's intentions. The presidential office said phone polling is fundamentally different from the real, actual voting process. It added the system cannot guarantee fair voting and is open to possible manipulation. The presidential office also said the system could actually increase rather than reduce costs for the candidate selection process, making it a waste of public money. Korea's Minor Justice Party and those in the opposition bloc aiming to create a new party in coming months also expressed opposition to the system, saying it will only favor candidates with an existing public awareness. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, Russia has launched its first airstrikes against targets in Syria. Russian President Vladimir Putin says warplanes struck Islamic State targets inside the country. Russian officials say aircraft carried out around 20 missions targeting IS positions. But the US says that so far they do not appear to have been targeting IS-held territory. You're seeing some video that Russia has supplied of those airstrikes. And Moscow has denied claims that dozens of civilians were killed. US officials say Washington was told to clear the skies 1 hour before the Russian strikes took place. Moscow backs the regime of President Bashar al-Assad in its fight against IS and other rebel groups. The US and its allies have insisted that Assad should leave office. The head of the International Monetary Fund says there's reason to be worried about the global economy. In a speech Wednesday, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde said a marked slowdown in big emerging markets will cut global growth to its lowest level since the deep global recession of 2009. She said it's unclear if the current situation is cyclical or if it represents a fundamental downturn. Lagarde added that the prospect of a rate hike in the US and China's slowdown are contributing to uncertainty and higher market volatility. Now, with the Volkswagen emissions scandal expected to shake the German economy, experts are raising concerns about Korea's reliance on its major companies. Oh Soo-young has this report.
It seems Korea is becoming overly dependent on its major conglomerates. Figures from the IMF and Bloomberg on Wednesday show that annual revenue from the country's largest company, Samsung, reached over $195 billion last year, accounting for almost 14% of the country's nominal GDP. Combined with Hyundai Motor, that figure reaches nearly 20%. This heavy reliance places Korea at the top of 15 countries whose GDPs exceeds $1 trillion. The UK ranked second, with BP accounting for around 12% of their GDP. In the remaining 13 countries, sales from the largest firms logged under 8%. While annual corporate revenues are not fully comparable with the nominal GDP, these statistics can be used to measure how much an economy depends on a specific company. As Korea's dependence more than doubles those of countries with similar GDPs, some are voicing concerns on the stability of the Korean economy.
The more reliant an economy is on a small number of companies, the more vulnerable it is to both internal and external shocks. In Finland's case, the economy slumped as a whole when Nokia sales declined. Korea could go through a similar experience with its heavy dependence on Samsung.
To safeguard the economy from suffering similar setbacks, experts suggest conglomerates should invest more in R&D to beat global competition. Meanwhile, policy should aim to achieve a balanced corporate landscape by building the capacities of small to medium businesses. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, Britain's Sherlock Holmes is one of the most popular foreign TV series here in Korea, but Korea remains the only nation in the OECD to ban private investigators. The government supports legalization, but the expected side effects are stirring some opposition. Lee Soo-eun reports.
Crime scene investigation, undercover duty. He's trying to clear his friend of false accusation, but in Korea, where private detectives are illegal, there are limitations.
The police and the prosecutors handle the big cases, but there are also those left unprotected. Since private investigation is illegal, there's no one to collect evidence for these conflicts and trials.
The government is in support. Just over a week ago, the police opened a blog that updates information on legalizing private investigation. It expects some 4,000 jobs to be created and hopes private investigators will help solve insurance fraud cases, find missing children, and even more. But there are concerns.
If access to an individual's private information is given to the private sector, that in itself raises the possibility of privacy violation. Realistically, only the rich can hire private detectives, so it creates an imbalance of information in judicial proceedings.
Citizens are also divided in the debate.
I'm against it because I feel like I'm being watched.
I think it's okay because they'll solve cases that the police can't solve.
Facing tense debate, bills to legalize private investigations are stalling. It seems that preparation against the potential side effects, like training and supervision, is necessary to break through the doors of the National Assembly. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Now, in some cultural news, the annual Seoul International Dance Festival has begun. It features modern dance from around the world, and the opening performance at this year's festival showcases the traditional Spanish folk dance flamenco. Now, Kim Ji-yeon takes us there.
An image of a woman dancing elegantly in a red frilly dress, striking relentlessly on the wooden floor. That's generally the most staple icon representing flamenco. or folk music created by gypsies of Spain's Andalusia region that has been passed down from generation to generation. But the opening piece for the Seoul International Dance Festival Image by the Ballet National de España shows that flamenco can be reinvented by incorporating elements of tradition as well as creativity.
The piece was made to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Ballet Nacional de España. It's a collection of stories about the company's 5 directors and their efforts to improve flamenco.
Chairs used in the first piece are reminiscent of the late dancer Mario Maya, who directed the ballet during the 1990s and who often used a piece of furniture in his work. Incorporating this prop to the 3 core elements of the traditional dance, cante, the singing, baile, the dancing, and the toque, the guitar element, is not easy work, as flamenco is much more structured than what most people think.
One has to take into consideration that flamenco was not passed down by written means, but by word of mouth. This element forces the artist to work within the framework and come up with new versions.
Some 40 pieces from about 30 countries will be featured at this year's Seoul International Dance Festival, which runs until October 18th. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you, as always, for watching. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.